Welcome to part 2 of a two-part series covering the history of Sawdustistan's armored vehicles. If you have no idea there was a part 1 and don't know what I'm talking about, part 1 is linked in the description and the iCard in the top right, so check that one out first. In this video, I'll be covering some of Sawdustistan's more ambitious designs and the reasoning behind them. One of the earlier examples of these projects was a 1 to 2 person armored car. Initially, the vehicle would have no name or designation, but due to a, quote, series of misunderstandings, it ended up with the name Moose, even though that name has nothing to do with the vehicle's design, and there aren't even any moose even remotely close to Sawdustistan. Later, when the new naming system was adapted, the Moose would receive the designation SDA-6. Although technically being an armored car, the Moose was designed to be the next main battle tank for the Sawdu military. Its mobility was to be far superior than any previous design thanks to its massive wheels and 16 horsepower engine coupled with an 8-speed transmission. Armor thickness is unknown, but is estimated to be around 5 to 10 millimeters or a composite of several materials totaling to around 30 millimeters. Angles in the front range from 35 to 45 degrees to maximize protection, although several flat portions are visible in the plans. The engine was also in the front, which would have provided an extra layer of protection for the crew who was in the rear. Depending on the version, the Moose was to have either 2 crew, a driver, commander/loader, or 1 who did everything. In the 2-man version, they would have sat single file in the center back of the vehicle, and the turret would have been further back on an extended frame. The 1-man version had the turret directly on top of the driver, which would only allow for about 45 degrees of turret traverse left and right, as the driver couldn't really do much more than that comfortably. The Moose was supposed to have the same 55mm gun system as the SDA-9 version 2, with a coaxial machine gun in the mantlet for defensive use. Alternatively, the defensive machine gun could have been mounted on the turret roof. The 55mm gun was also supposed to have a semi-stabilizer to aid in accuracy. The spent shell casings would have been discarded automatically out the back of the turret once fired. Only one mock-up prototype of the Moose was partially created, and no pictures were ever taken. However, the experimental technology and concepts that made up its design, such as the gun system, stabilizer, and mobility improvements, would all carry over to the next major design, the SDA-10. The SDA-10 is one of the most well-documented and complex out of all the Sawdu vehicles. Because it was designed to be the next main battle tank for the Sawdu military, it was granted the Mark III designation. The first version of the Mark III was a 2-person medium tank, very reminiscent of the Mark II. Crew layout was largely the same, but with more room to operate. The turret would have had a full 360-degree traverse and was to carry the same 55mm gun from the Moose, as well as the stabilizer. No coaxial machine guns are in the plans, although it's possible it was going to be mounted on the roof. A bustle stuck out the back of the turret for either radio placement or ammo storage. Crew hatches were directly above their positions and had the ability to lock when in a closed position. Armor thickness was to be around 30 to 35mm on average, but certain parts would have been up to 100mm thanks to the inner frame. The Mark III was also planned to be fully tracked with 5 to 6 road wheels on each side. A single frame was built, but due to technological limitations and design requirement changes, it was scrapped. Version 2 made an effort to simplify the design while also upgrading its capabilities. Instead of 6 small road wheels on each side, it was changed to 3 large wheels on each side with a different type of suspension. The turret gained a coaxial machine gun, but all other features stayed the same. However, the interior was changed to have 1 extra crew member who would serve as a co-driver and possibly an ammo passer. The hatch for both the driver and co-driver was now on the very front of the vehicle, however the commanders remained on the roof of the turret. 2 additional concepts were designed for the second version, an add-on armor variant to provide additional protection, and a turretless casemate version that most likely would have added yet another crew member to the Mark III's roster. This 4th man would either be a designated gunner/loader to free up the commander, or would have just loaded. This casemate version has some significance as the Mark III version 3 would end up sticking with this look. The third and final version of the Mark III was far different from the initial first concept. Once again, the amount of wheels changed, this time from 3 to 4 on each side, and the idler wheel was removed entirely. The main gun was now in the center of the hull between the driver and co-driver. A small turret was added to the roof for the commander. This would have had 360 degrees of traverse and had viewports all the way around. Next to this defensive turret was the hatch for the loader, which the commander might have used as well. The hatches for the driver and co-driver were now triangular and on the sides of the vehicle. The frame of the version 3 was also much heavier and more robust than the original frame built for version 1. Only one partially completed version 3 Mark III existed before being scrapped and parted out on March 6, 2022. The reasoning behind the project cancellation was a combination of resource shortages, lack of funding, and once again technological limitations, this time revolving around the engine and drivetrain. The Mark III had the longest planning and prototyping stage out of any other Sawdu tank, lasting nearly 2.5 years. During this time, an order came from the acting Prime Minister to make rough drafts of a variety of AFVs for future use. These designs were not planned to be put into production at any time soon, but rather to just be on hold. The first of these was a tracked utility vehicle that could fit a variety of roles. This was known as the Standard Utility Tractor Model 1, or just SUT-1. It was essentially a platform on treads with an armored cab for 2 crew members, a driver and a radio operator. As seen in the top picture, large panels could be attached to the back of it to turn it into an armored personnel carrier. The SUT-1 could also be used to haul cargo and supplies, even in active combat situations. Another design that was requested was something to be used as mobile artillery. As you may have noticed, 2 out of the 3 vehicles shown are just modified SUT-1s. One of them has a designated artillery turret directly attached to the chassis. The other one is just a normal SUT-1 with an anti-tank field gun strapped to the back. This might have also just been for transport. The third self-propelled artillery vehicle is specifically designed for nothing else but its intended role. However, it is possible that this SPG had thicker armor compared to the SUT-1, allowing it to play a more direct fire role and engage enemy armor. It wasn't the only anti-tank vehicle thought up, though. 3 additional heavy tank destroyers were among the vehicles designed. These were meant for frontline breakthrough purposes and all had similar features: massive guns and very thick armor. The thought behind these behemoths was to be an impenetrable bunker on tracks. The only problem was, most if not all opponents Sawdustistan came across barely had tankettes, let alone anything threatening enough to warrant such a series of assault tanks. But if these are impractical designs, what does an impossible design look like? It looks like this. Prototype 17 is Sawdustistan's version of the mouse. Supposedly, it was to be as over-the-top and impractical as possible, and its only real use would have been as an intimidation machine. No actual dimensions are given, however I'm pretty sure the smaller turret on top of the main one is the same as the Mark III version 2's main turret, which makes this thing pretty big. Armor thickness and amount of crew is unknown. Obviously, this vehicle never left the paper it was drawn on. And that brings us to the final design, the Mark IV. This was designed around the time the Mark III was being dismantled and scrapped. Only partial blueprints exist for the Mark IV, so no specifications are exact yet, although it is most likely a 2-person vehicle with the same 55mm gun as the Mark III was planned to have. As of now, this is the latest vehicle concept that the Sawdu military is working on. Hopefully you've enjoyed part 2 of this look at Sawdustistan's armored vehicles. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. As always, I'm the Tank Nerd. Thanks for watching.